Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Dress and Drinks, the next episode. I'm Leon Wiebers. I am the host, and I'm a professor of costume design at Loyola Marymount University. I would love to introduce our curator for today and our guest curators. First of all, Chelsea Knife, the head curator of the Windham Mill Museum in Willimantic, Connecticut. Before working at the Mill Museum, Chelsea was a film and theater costumer, which highlighted her natural understanding of historic dress. To further understand her craft, Chelsea began to study the histories of the garments she was making, and her love of historical textiles led her to volunteer in the Windham Mill Museum, where Chelsea is now employed. While she pursues her master's degree in history and library sciences and archives from Simmons University. She works with the museum's collection. The majority of the collection includes women's clothing from the late 19th to 20th centuries, which reflects the museum's ties to the Industrial Revolution. And as usual, our cocktail for this evening is the Cider Mill Cocktail, and the alcohol-free version is the Red Hot Apple Mocktail, and a big shout out again to Ann Wass for the recipe. So shake it up and give yourself a pour with a lovely little Granny Smith green apple garnish. And with that, please welcome Chelsea Knife to our show. And with her tonight is Jackie Ray, I'm sorry, Chelsea, Jackie is your co-curator?
Yes.
At the museum? Excellent. I wanted to make sure that I got that correct. So welcome, Chelsea and Jackie. It's so exciting to have you here. I am just tickled I can't wait to see what you have to show. There's some really interesting preview things. Tonight's gonna really touch on my love for old technology. So super old technology. So with that, Chelsea and Jackie, welcome. Jackie, would you like to say a little bit about yourself since I introduced Chelsea, and just a little brief bio for you?
Oh, sure. I got my bachelor's at Eastern Connecticut State University in History and Social Sciences. And while I was doing that, I started interning here at the museum and just kind of never left. So I've been hanging out on a volunteer basis. I started just kind of helping out the former curator. And then when she had to step away, we kind of went on a hiatus for a little while. Then Chelsea so kindly wanted to get back into it. So I was more than happy to jump back on the team and start working with the archives again.
Excellent. Well, welcome both of you. Okay, so let's just dive right in.
So before we get into the museum specifically, I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about the town we're in, because the town itself is very unique. It's the only place you're going to see gigantic copper frogs sitting on gigantic cement spools. They're all over the town. It's really unique. And there's two reasons for it. One reason being the spools, one reason being the frogs, and they got married together for some odd reason. The frog story comes first, and if you ever step foot into Willimantic, Connecticut, and you say, frogs, what about this frogs? What are these? They will all tell you. Everyone will ask you if you know the frog story. So I'm going to tell you now to save you this if you ever visit. So the frogs date back to the French and Indian War, also known as the 7 Years' War. And what had happened is there was a large pond in Windham called Frog Pond. There was hundreds upon hundreds of frogs that were in the pond. While they were sleeping one night, the local village heard a whole bunch of screaming, and they thought they were being attacked by the local Pequot tribe. So they grabbed their pistols, their muskets, I should say, put on their coats and ran down to the pond to find frogs murdered all over the pond, just dead. Just hundreds of dead frogs. So they've completely freaked out about it, of course, and there were stories written about it. Other towns made fun of Windham, and Windham's like, we'll just own it. And the frog kind of became a big part of Windham. Scientists later on tried to study why this phenomena happened, and most likely there was a drought, and the frogs were actually fighting over the little bit of food that was there. So hence the giant frogs. The spools are actually an ode to both the Willimantic Linen Company, or Windham Linen Company, and American Thread, which were very large parts of why the town exists and why it got so built up over the years. They were in business until 1985 here in Willimantic, and started in, our mill started in the 1820s, so quite a long time of being round. So that is our beautiful town.
That's amazing. I love the story of the frogs, that they essentially like attacked each other for the food.
It's what you do when you're a frog, I guess.
Well, that, but
It's weird.
this is, lots of frog legs to have for dinner later that night. I mean, delish.
That's true, except for the fact that we were being attacked by the French, so probably didn't want to eat those legs. Semantics. So this is a view of our building. So we operate out of the old store that was for the workers of American Thread, and that's that maroon building on the left. This was a fun rainbow that appeared last summer that I caught a photo of from one of the other buildings that we own. Across the street is some of the remnants of the mills. They were built, I believe, in the 1840s or so. Well, each building was built at a different point, but they started popping up in the 1840s. Each mill had a different number, and there was quite a few of them originally. So we still can see the mills of what's left of them right across the street from our building. Our archives, where we're sitting right now, is up on the 3rd floor. Our 2nd floor is all permanent exhibits that talk about the different people that operated in and out of the mills, including mill workers and also mill managers, and showing the difference in how they lived. And our bottom floor has a traveling exhibit. It was actually underwear of the 20th century, and now it's become Christmas trees and more of a kids acceptable exhibit. Not that kids don't love seeing torpedo bras, but really.
I mean,
so yeah, you just got to duck, if you get too close. We only lost one eye that entire exhibit, so it was pretty good. Yeah. But that is us. So we have a lot of our exhibit spaces dedicated to the mills themselves. So that means mill machinery, big, scary, spooky machinery. It also means different artifacts related to American Thread. We're actually sitting on the computer is sitting on one of the original tables from the library from the 1880s, which is pretty cool. And all the architecture here too is original to the building. So it's a pretty cool place. So you want to talk about the scary machinery?
Yeah, we can talk about some scary machinery.
Oh wait, no, I forgot. I skipped a slide. Hold on. We're gonna build up the anticipation instead of the spooky and scary machinery. So our curatorial project started during COVID. So we had a prior curator who had a family emergency and had to step away. And she was gone for some time, and they were holding out, hoping she'd come back. But during that time, we took in sessions. People leave sewing machines on our back porch like we're an orphanage. And so these just kind of piled up and to the point where when COVID happened, I was laid off from my prior job where I taught sewing and fashion. And I chose to volunteer here originally to help clean up the mess that was happening because we didn't have anyone to take care of it, and kind of found myself then eventually getting this position. Still not full time. I wish in a way I was because I think we'd move faster. But this is just a small corner of our 3rd floor library. And some of the books we have are actually original to the library of the 1880s. But our archives are up here, and it was just a very big project. Jackie came back to help volunteer and really clean up and get kind of our archives back in order. And it's still a project that's never ending. We still find items that have not been assessed, or maybe were donated that someone just threw in a box somewhere in the museum because they were a volunteer and didn't know what to do with them. So it's never ending.
But the exciting thing about it is because we don't have a full accession of the archive and we're working back through and redoing all of that process, we get to touch every single beautiful piece of clothing along the way and rediscover some of the beautiful things that we've been keeping safe for all this time. So it's tough, but it's been really rewarding and really a lot of fun.
So we took advantage of the situation and decided to start with a clean slate. We were working with Past Perfect before and switched to catalog it, and decided just to re-inventory everything we had, which is probably going to be at least a 5 to 10 year project. But it gives us a way to really take photos and also have an online website, which we're hopefully going to be releasing soon, of all the artifacts we have in our collection. So good stuff.
Oh, that's fantastic. As the viewers know, and you may be aware, Chelsea, my colleague Monica Sklar and I for CSA are working on a digitization project to help collections digitize their some to train and help them digitize their objects, which will then hopefully lead into an online searchable portal where all these collections can sort of be together and more readily discoverable and easily searched by scholars and, you know, anyone really. So that sounds awesome. And you're right, it's a rare opportunity where you get to step back and be like, okay, it's a big mess, but okay, let's clean up this mess and do this and go back through and clean up the metadata and do other things in that way. So that's awesome.
Yeah, being able to share a collection and have people see these objects is going to be such a great opportunity, because I know like we get giddy and giggle and get like and squeal like little schoolgirls when we see things, and we want nothing more than for everybody else to be able to use it for research purposes, or just to gawk at it and go, oh, that's pretty. You know, they deserve to be seen. So we're excited to be working on it.
Yep. And we also work with the CTDA, which is the Connecticut Digital Archives, and those that is an online database for Connecticut specifically. So we have a lot of our trade cards and local postcards and things like that that we've scanned and put into there that are more Connecticut specific. So we've been happy to be able to work with them as well.
We will be in touch after
right.
this webinar to talk more about digitization.
Sure.
Awesome.
I also want to just comment on the fact that digitization is a really fun word to say. And I'm sure as you all drink more, it'll become even more fun to say. All right, so I think it's time, that time of the night where we get to scary machinery.
I think so.
All right,
yeah, I think
let's
so.
go. Let's go.
So what you are looking at right now is what is called a spinning machine. I'm going to back up the process just a hair so you can
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? You cut out a little bit. Can you, what's this called again?
Oh, yeah, so this is called a spinning machine, and this does a couple of different things. So we have the main beautiful brown maroon building that you saw in the photo, but the place that the photo was taken from was Dugan Mill. And we've kind of set up this mill to kind of give you a glimpse at what a typical mill floor would look like. So we have like a little tinker shop set up, we have the printing portion of the shop set up, we have some looms in there, and most importantly, we have a piece of the machinery for kind of each step of turning raw cotton into what we use in costuming, and which is thread. So before we get to this process, there's a carding machine that basically takes these big, huge 30-pound bales of just raw cotton and does what like a cotton gin used to do on a hand-to-hand basis, and will filter all that cotton out and get all the junk out of it and make it good for thread. And it turns it into this big, thick thread, basically. And then we take that to this spinning machine that you see here. And you can see up on the top, all of that thick thread is being taken and it's being stretched and it's being turned and spun onto bobbins below, which is all these very vertical spots. So from there, we have kind of your basic thread, and we'll take it and we spin it one more time onto, you know, your regular size bobbins that you normally see when you go to the store to get. So that's what this machine does. It takes it from that raw cotton material and really kind of weaves it all into thread. So if you want to go into the next.
Well, this thing, by the way, is from the 50s. So it was used by American Thread. It does actually operate. However, we don't run it because if we do break anything on it, none of the parts are manufactured anymore. So it would be, we'd have to have it custom made, and we're a very poor, sad little museum. So we could not afford that at the moment.
Yeah.
So, but it is a really cool machine. So at some point we're planning on, as a part of our digitization process, we're going to be doing videos of all of our machinery working. And I mean all, that's my goal. And do a little QR. I actually like fixing machines. It's really weird because I used to break my sewing machine all the time. I put things I probably shouldn't into my sewing machine a lot with some of the weird costume productions that I costumed. So I learned how to fix different mechanical machines, and now I'm into more of these scary machines. I can also fix typewriters. Weird side note. All right.
So the last thing I do want to note about this machine is it looks very big and it is very large. This machine is actually a replica machine. The actual machines that they were using in the mills are 4 times larger. So if you can kind of get a mental picture of how big that is. I wish I had taken a picture of you next to it for size.
Oh yeah, but I'm a small human, so
yeah,
I'm bad to
So
size.
These things are pretty gigantic, and one woman would be in charge of 4 of these gigantic machines on a day-to-day basis for 10 to 12-hour shifts. So you know, they're pretty huge, pretty loud, pretty scary, kind of cool. But in order to get all of this thread onto the bobbin or the spools that we use, we need to manufacture the spools. So we have in our, why am I forgetting the name of it? Awesome. We have a tumbler. Hello. So this is our tumbler, and this will take all of our raw cut wooden spools and just spin it with some material to, you know, get all those rough edges out so we're not ruining our thread. So Chelsea is going to pull up. We actually do have a video of this one working, because this one does work, and it's pretty basic, so we don't have to worry about any of the machinery.
What's inside, like sandpaper? What do you mean by what to help smooth down the edges? What do you know what goes inside
So
between?
Yeah, it's usually like a very thin, like sand composite material. So it's like sandpaper, but instead of you standing and physically doing it on paper, this is basically just tumbling it for you, kind of like a rock tumbler. If you've ever used one of those when you were a kid, or, you know, had one for like a nephew or whatever. And it basically just makes the process a lot faster, and we can do it on a much larger scale because it's a very big drum. So here you go.
All right, so I'm gonna hit play, and it's very loud. That was the exciting video.
That's very
Perfect.
cool. How many spools can go in there at one time?
Oh gosh, I'm not sure that we even know. Hundreds. I don't think
Nope.
they have an exact
From the
number.
beginning. Yeah, there's oop, there we
There
go.
you go.
There's a bunch of the naked spools that we have. There's a lot that can fit in there. You know, that's a good question of how many total.
Oh, that would be
I
a
wonder
great,
if
like, that would be a great fundraising thing. You guys should do something like, guess how many spools are in the tumbler. You know,
that could be
raffle it
fun.
off.
I like that. Yeah.
like that.
And that's another thing that we also have hundreds of that are left on our back porch are spools.
Spools.
So many spools.
Yes. Partially because I think the next slide is the stamps.
Oh, is
Always
it? No, I
wooden
don't think it's this.
spools, or plastic spools too.
Oh no, like everything.
Everything. If it was American thread, it's dropped
anything.
off at our location for
Yeah, anything. It's more like, this is textile related. You can have it.
We are the home of wayward textiles.
This is true. Yeah, we have this huge bucket of wooden spools that that we show that kids get to dig through and things like that. So
Nice.
there it goes.
There we go.
So this is not machinery specific. It's also a really fun photo that I took. But after they would get all the thread wound, and this is a later thread, probably from the later 20th century. I'd probably say the 1970s because it's super polyester. But they would put them on these big metal racks before packaging them. And one of the fun things about American Thread and Windham Linen Company and a lot of the different mills is that everything was made in-house. So not only was the thread manufactured there, but the spools were, the packaging was, even the stamps, which brings me to the next slide, these guys. So we actually have the full collection of American Thread's stamps that they would use to make labels. We have all the drawers they kept them in. We have all of these heavy metal stamps. We even have the printing equipment that went with it. So we could actually recreate any of these if we want. It's a part of our working machinery. And that's something too, I've been working with one of the guys for printing presses and trying to get it, you know, really working. So we somewhere have a mimeograph too that I haven't been able to locate yet, but we have a sign for one. So we assume we have one.
It's here somewhere.
Somewhere. So
Well,
these are just cool because you
then
can
you'll need all
think
those
about the
chemicals.
label.
Then you'll need all those chemicals to do the mimeographing, and you know, and that will
Yeah.
be a whole other thing.
Yeah, but it could be fun, you know, at least a one-time adventure, be like, check that off my list, never go back. But hey, it was fun. And we certainly have our collection of odd chemicals. Usually we take them and say, all right, we're gonna have to discuss this. We'll put it aside and talk about that later. I can tell you guys about our anti-skeeter that we found. Yeah, we'll save that for the end because that's a really fun chemical combination of joy and such. It's gross. Yeah, so we have all these. I thought these were cool because usually we don't talk about, or you don't even think about the labels that go on the spools or anything. So we also have a vast sewing machine collection. So Sewing machine manufacturing was a big thing. This is just some of our machines too. We have a lot.
This is a small corner of our sewing
We have
room.
so many. So Connecticut was a big part of the sewing machine manufacturing. We have Wilson and Wheeler. Actually, Howe was in Bridgeport for some time. Wilson and Wheeler was one of the bigger ones and one of the only sewing machine companies that didn't try to screw over anybody else in the 19th century. Good for them. They made the Wilson and Wheeler number 9, and Singer said, "My goodness, I like that machine. We're going to totally buy you out." And so in 1905, Singer bought out Wilson and Wheeler, and now we have Singer in Connecticut. We have quite a few of the Bridgeport-made Wilson and Wheelers. There's actually a picture of one at the end, and we also have a few other baby sewing machines. So you'll see here we have a couple 1950s Singers. This guy is a New England sewing machine that is from the late 19th century. We also have quite a few chain stitch machines. I didn't put any in this particular slide, but we have sewing machines that range from the 1870s up.
Wow.
So and a lot of them work. We actually have a lamp that's sitting over behind us. It is another chain stitch little machine. I don't think you can, oh yeah, you can kind of see it. It totally works on the lamp. The lamp works and the sewing machine works. So
that's exciting.
Yeah, that's another plan, is to get all of these working and running. And an idea too for other sewing machines. We had gotten so many of these little baby sewing machines, the toy machines left on our back steps, as I said before, like an orphanage, that we did a adoption clinic at one point where you could purchase a photo of one of these machines, and you got a little like informational card with it and a collectible lace ornament that I made to adopt this machine. It's still on our website, so you can do that. We have 2 machines available, the Stitchwell and the I think it's the New England sewing machine. So you could help a poor starving sewing machine in need. And we did a little video with it and everything, which was a lot of fun. So this is one of the sewing machines that you can adopt. This is our Stitchwell. It's my favorite toy sewing machine that we have in our collection. It's adorable. It's probably from around the 1920s or so based on our research. So it's not old, but it's super cute. So these sewing machines, or the original toy machines that came out in the mid-19th century, were a lot of times used by families that couldn't afford a full-size machine. But eventually these sewing machines were used by kids. You could clamp them on your treadle table next to where you were working so they could sew along with you and pretty much train for their future career as sewing things for other people. As all good little girls should learn. And of course, this is staged, as you can see, with some of our Willimantic star thread from American Thread Company.
I'm curious that the little pad of felt is still on this sewing machine from the 1920s.
Yes. A lot of our machines are surprisingly complete. One of the hardest things is a lot of them have little springs that are on the left side of the head here that can break off, but a lot of ours have those. There are some companies that you can find reproductions from, but sometimes people will just donate boxes of parts, and we can use those to kind of make a Franken machine out of these and make them work as well.
What you're telling me is, like, anybody in the audience who has one of these machines and needs some advice on how to repair it, call you.
Yeah, so one of the things I did where I was teaching is I also took training classes on sewing machine repair, as did my husband. So he's certified through Brothers Sewing Machines, and I'm certified, I think, just basic machine repair. So, you know, it helps. But yeah, I can give advice certainly, and also recommend where to go for parts, because that's always a hard thing. But a lot of times it's just eBay or going to tag sales and finding a machine that's in rough condition.
Yeah.
You know, luckily most of ours, they're in pretty good condition, although we have had some come in that are pretty bad. Yeah. But this is one of my favorite older machines. It's a Shuttle Machine. It's from 1870s, but it has this beautiful little picture on it. And a lot of the machines at the time they're very ornate. They're beautiful. They were works of art, unlike our plastic machines today.
Yeah.
We spent a lot more time with them, so we want them to look nice. It's worth putting the effort into them.
Yeah. All right, so now into pretty dresses.
On to the clothes.
Hooray! So Our costume collection, a lot of it is in rough shape. And as I'm training in textiles and things like that, I can do some conservational work, but I haven't felt comfortable yet on our collection. I've been working on a lot of my own personal collection first to make sure I'm really prepared before I start working on any of these. And a lot of ours, they are stored in archival boxes. They are stored properly, but they were donated where you could tell how they were stored. Like for an example, this cloak was definitely stored on a metal hanger for quite some time because there's rust in the shape of the hanger on the inside of the cloak.
Oh.
So you can see, that, and a lot of people leave garments like that. We found one, they donated it was a big steamer trunk. And when we opened it up, it was snow inside, as in just white mold. And those garments had to be disposed of, unfortunately. I tried to bring some home and save them, but unfortunately, by the time we got the mold off of it, the fabric had deteriorated. It was a lot of 1880s and 1890s silk, so they did not survive. So a lot of the stuff that we come in or get in is things that are interesting, and the way that they're deteriorating can tell us about the construction. So it's not necessarily bad, it's just a different type of garment than the pristine. So this one I liked because it's not, your simple velvet cloak. It's quilted, it's lined, it's very nice, but not too ornate. Quilting is something that I've always been fascinated by. I think it's beautiful. And especially with now sewing machines being involved, it's a lot quicker and easier to quilt a garment than it would be in, let's say, the 18th century where it had to be done by hand. So this one has silk.
So shall we assume then it is machine quilted?
It is, yes.
Oh, cool.
And one of the ways that you can tell, which I assume all of you can probably tell, but looking at both sides, you can see how the inside stitching was. And if you can't see the inside stitching, usually you can tell by how pristine, or at least everything's a perfect same stitch length. Which, an interesting fact as well, your stitch lengths on sewing machines that were commonly used have grown over the centuries and, well, decades. So the older the garment, a lot of times the smaller the stitch length. So our modern garments typically use a 3.5 to 4 millimeter stitch length, where then it could be anything from a 1.6 to a 1.8 millimeter. So.
Oh, wow. That's interesting to know.
Yeah, that's when you get to real nerdy levels of sewing machine facts.
That's why you're here. That is absolutely very interesting. So this is a really interesting cloak. I love the fringe on it. That's awesome. Like if you could, I'd love to see a close-up of that fringe. That looks really cool.
So I have one photo. It didn't come out the best, but you can kind of see the angling here on the fringe.
Oh, nice. Very nice. Oh,
yep,
yeah,
and you can see the machine stitching.
Yeah, that machine stitch is teeny tiny.
Very small.
And it's interesting too, because a lot of times they use like a waxed cotton, so the thread would actually have a slight sheen to it, where our modern thread is typically matte. So it's, Yeah, this was an interesting cloak that we have. It's got a cotton lining, but a silk outer layer. I don't know what's inside of it for the quilting. It could be cotton batting, but it might also be a wool batting.
Fortunately, this one is in good enough shape that nothing has peeled away, so we don't get the chance to kind of peek inside on this particular item.
Right.
Yeah. So the next dress or skirt, I should say, that we have, I love that a lot of our 19th century skirts or petticoats have pockets. So this was something that I just had to take a picture of. And I think I know the reasoning of why garments don't have pockets now for women. And that was based on studies from World War II. So before that point, women's garments had pockets left and right. They didn't have those falsy pockets that just irritate the junk out of all of us ladies. Even in World War I, the Hello Girls and the female telephone operators had big pockets on their uniforms. However, when World War II came, the original WAAC, the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, had pockets on their uniforms. They used them. Weird, I know. But it offended some of the generals and different army officers that were male. They thought it looked unseemly, unprofessional. So they actually started making false pockets towards the mid of the war, especially when the Auxiliary Corps went to the regular Army Corps in 1943, leaving women without pockets. And that idea has traveled since that point. So I'm blaming all of our pocket problems on World War II.
Excellent. The pocket mystery is solved. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yeah, so the World War II just turned into the war on pockets. That's the true threat, the true fascist.
Exactly. If anybody else knows more about pockets in World War II, please add this to the chat.
The weird things you learn about. So this dress I wanted to show, or skirt, I keep saying dress. One reasoning is that there is a little gusset added in here, and it's just perfect. Yeah. And I love those little details in garments where, you know, when we're doing stuff, we try to line it up and make it look perfect, and it's never exact. And this one, you know, it's slightly off, but it's beautiful. And even the trim, I have another picture of the trim that I'm going to show. It's all pinked on the edge. It looks like it was with a crank pinker rather than a pair of scissors or a stamp, just because some of them look a little bit uneven, which would not have been done with scissors. And with the older version of the stamp you'd heat up, you would probably see some burning on the edges, which there seems to be none of that. And in our collection, we actually have a few of those like big hand crank monsters that we could probably oil up and get working.
Those are absolutely amazing. The only time I've ever used one of those was in Boston, actually. There's a costume shop called Costume Works. So this is a shout out to Costume Works Incorporated and Liz Perlman, who owns it, who are not in the audience tonight. But they have one in the shop. And I was like, where did you get this? She's like, I got this at a tag sale. And it was just like the joy. It was the most joyous pinking one has ever done. You're just like, la, la, la. I could pink for days. It was so amazing.
I love those. Although, to be honest, I love the modern rotary cutter version, although there's not as many ornate designs you can do, but they're still a lot quicker. So if I'm doing a reproduction gown for, you know, our exhibit, I just kind of go whoo, with a ruler, and I don't know, it's still pretty rewarding.
The satisfaction of turning the crank on the machine is really nice, though. I definitely agree with you. There's just something visceral about it.
Yeah, I've never converted to the rotary.
We have a lot of machines. No, I can't convert you to the dark side.
No. I have really big hands, and so I love a big pair of tailor shears, just like chomp, chomp, chomp.
Somewhere we have a giant pair of scissors. I think we just packaged them up, but they're huge scissors that may or may not be a weapon of mass destruction. I'm not sure. Anyway, so this one, it's silk, again, with a cotton lining. It's like a waxed cotton lining in there. It has a canvas base that's stitched in. It's actually stitched in at the same time they stitched in the ruffles. They added that in as well. So it's all the same. So that's a lot of multitasking they did there. So ode to this dressmaker.
So you're saying that the cotton lining is just from the ruffles down, and that's where it is, just around the bottom?
Oh no, the canvas bottom that they have to protect the gown and kind of help it sit a little nicer is just on the bottom, and that stretches. And I assume it is also to hold up the ruffles, but there is a full cotton lining throughout the whole thing, and it's flat lined for the most part.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you, just for the clarification.
And I have on the next slide, you can see a close-up here of the ruffles, and then also how they connected it to the waistband here. And this is the back where they have the nice train.
And you can see how it's a little off there at the waistband, which you were talking about, and those tiny cartridge pleats.
Oh yeah, they're beautiful. And this one actually connects in the front, so there's no hook and eyes or anything left on it. And I can't tell I assuming it was hook and eye, but that actually was in the front. So unlike a lot of the other dresses we have or skirts we have in our collection, petticoats. So, and I like that the pinking was done both on the top and bottom of this. Yeah.
That's an adorable pink edge. Oh my gosh, it's so cute.
I know, I wish we had all of these.
Girl, I'm like, oh, that's so cute.
I've been able to do a wider version of this with the scissors before, where you mark it and then you slowly like cut around it. But this one, I assume was much easier with whatever die they were using or roller.
I know, I wish we had that die.
Yeah, we only have the one, which does little triangles that are similar, but they're pointy.
Ooh, I might send you something to pink just so I can see what that is.
Sure. Well, I
Or
mean, we can.
Send me a pink thing.
It's not that. I can send you a pink thing.
Okay, send me a pink thing. So, okay, I'm gonna stop talking so we can get through, so we can open this up because we're just having a gab session here.
That's totally acceptable. So this is another top. This one it's so polka dot, and I love polka dots, especially
so
19th century polka dots. And it has this cute little watch pocket, ooh, which I went to the next slide accidentally, but it has a teeny tiny watch pocket, which I think is adorable. A lot of people I've heard say, oh, there was no pockets for watches. That didn't exist on women's garments. And I'm like, exhibit A.
We tucked them into the seams to make them really easy to hide. So if you didn't have one, you didn't know that there was a pocket there. Very sneaky.
Yep, and I would still have a pocket watch if I didn't let my not that antique one run through the washing machine, but that's a story for another day. So I have this showing the inside because it's in really good condition on the inside. Unfortunately, this one came to us with a lot of light damage. It looks like it was in display or on display in a window somewhere because the front of it is completely like almost white. It's very, very light blue, where the back of it is this beautiful, deep, dark color. And a lot of garments that we get in are like that. They have light damage and different stains on them. Sometimes the stains are from the wearer, and it's interesting to look at them and figure out what those stains are from to tell us a story about who was wearing it. In this case, it was the story of how it was stored.
You can even in this picture, if you look at the top, it's the what is the right sleeve. You can kind of see it's not the lighting that is making it look lighter there. That is actually the discoloration of the garment.
Yeah, which is unfortunate. So we use this example a lot when we have someone new come onto our board and our curatorial committee, and they don't understand why we yell at them for turning, like sometimes they'll come up and they just want to see the archives, and then they turn on the lights and leave them on. And then this is why you don't do that garment to yell at them. I mean, our garments are in boxes anyway, so they shouldn't get damaged by the light, but it's still a nice piece to show an example of how light damage is irreversible. So close up again of our tiny pocket. This was also machine sewn, but then was gone back and done handwork. As you can see on some of the boning channels and also the edges of the pocket, they did a little whip stitch on the edge to kind of seal it.
That's just a precious little pocket.
It's adorable.
They got very excited when they saw it the first time.
and I don't know if other curators do this, but every time we get a donation of something, I always check the pockets hoping that there's like cash in there. So far we found a bunch of cleaning wipes in one and a comb from the 1960s. There's a gum wrapper.
Yeah, no money yet.
Yeah, nothing exciting. Yeah.
Darn.
The comb is gross.
Yeah.
I mean,
but
not
this
even,
is the
not even
inside
a
of
silver dollar.
No,
I know.
no, just some dust sometimes, you know, our failed hopes and dreams, things like that. So this shows the inside of the buttons, which I thought was cool because instead of just reinforcing them, there's little metal rings. And that's kind of a unique thing. I mean, you see it here and there, but I don't know. I thought it was fun. Little brass rings.
Is that wrapped with burlap?
Yes, they also tied little, it's not burlap, I think it's just little linen scraps or cotton scraps. But yeah, they're also tied on there underneath the ring. So they really wanted to make sure those buttons were going to stay there.
I think it's also, from a preservation standpoint, it's kind of helped the rings from actually touching the silk too. So as you can see, like you don't see any damage from the rust or anything on the silk around it, which I was very happy to see.
Yeah, we were appreciative.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
And then these two pictures, this shows how you can see how light this is, by the way, and the outside of the buttons, which are these little mother of pearl dome buttons. And this pocket is sat so nicely in the seam for the peplum on the jacket, so you can barely even see it. And then the picture on the right, there's all these little hand stitches. I just wanted to show some of the nice details, and that's what I find from going from a attendee to museums where I would stare at them and take pictures of the outside of the garments so that I could recreate them for different films and costumes, to then being able to see the actual insides and how they're constructed. A lot of times we get very nervous on how we make a reconstruction costume and say, oh my gosh, it's not perfect, it doesn't look great. And then I look at the inside of some of these and go, oh man.
I was extremely
Totally.
impressed when we came upon this one for the first time, because most of the time when you're looking at, especially the Victorian garments, they were so concerned about how the outside looked. By the time they got to the inside, they weren't filling their seams. We weren't worrying. Our armpits looked disastrous. It was just, you know, a race to the finish, I think, which I think everyone can relate to as a seamstress or a sewer. So this one struck me as very odd, because they must have had a lot of time to put this one together, because every stitch is filled, every seam is rolled properly and hand whipped into place. So they definitely put a lot of care into this particular one. So I thought that was kind of cool. Even the armpits are done.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
most likely this one was done by a tailor in town or surrounding. We do have some documents of different tailors who professionally made dresses from this era, so it could be from one of them.
Is there a label in this garment?
There is not.
Most of our clothing doesn't have labels. I think a majority of our older clothing is all hand done.
Yeah.
Just local owned.
Yeah, not uncommon.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if the local tailors had labels. We have a lot of the original sewing patterns they used. So some really old, I think there's Butterick and McCall's patterns from the 1880s and 90s. So kind of like the real beginning of the paper pattern industry. And we have a couple boxes of those. And I thought it'd be really cool to try to make a garment with those. And then I opened them up and it was just piles of unlabeled shapes. And I'm like, that's a future project.
Not today.
Yeah, that's for future me. So, you know, maybe one day I would love to go through some of our old patterns and trace them, and then use those to make some reproductions to show how they were made. And again, you know, for our video series that we're planning to do. So.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, even use some original machinery. Why not? You do a video of me using the cranker, which that's usually the face I do when I.
You could go from cotton to garment in your entire video. You're like, here I am spinning the thread, and now putting it in, turning it into, you know, onto a spool. You could do the whole thing.
And we could do that for multiple eras too, because we also have a lot of pre-industrial equipment. We also have, you know, different spinning wheels and looms. We have a barn loom. One of our most unique older looms is a Jacquard loom. It's disassembled at the moment, otherwise I would have shown you guys, but it is really unique. And Jacquard looms are considered one of the bigger steps into modern machinery, because they actually had those punch cards that you'd put on them. And then later embroidery machines had a similar punch cards, as did computers. So it was kind of this big step into the modern era, but way back then. So, you know, that I'd love to get working as well. You know, just throw some cloth in there and sit there and weave one day, have some beautiful stuff, you know, sell it on eBay for thousands of dollars. Our museum will be great. All right, so that's it for what we have. And by the way, this is a Wilson & Wheeler #9 from Bridgeport, Connecticut. So it's, you know, one of our locally made machines. And that is one of my quilts that I designed for, oh gosh, what was it called? It was some quilting thing.
The Quilting Madness.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was called. Yeah, some sort of like quilting block you could run around and collect. But anyway, so just want to say thank you guys for hosting us, and of course, any questions you have.
Absolutely.
Now is the
First
time.
of all, it's a beautiful quilt. That's a beautiful small quilt block. That's lovely. And thank you so much. You have some very cool things. And I love what you've shown. So my first question, did you make that quilt on one of your older machines, or did you make that on a modern machine?
That one I cheated. I used a modern machine. I have a Brother Dream machine that I love, and so that's what I used for that. And that one was also digitally designed. So I took sketches, scanned them in, used a vector program to create the fabric shapes, and then cut them out on a cutting machine, ironed them down, and then stitched them raw edge. So it was a lot of steps.
Nice, but I mean, it changes how you do quilting in that way. It's more that's so curvilinear as opposed to the sort of different rectilinear or geometric shapes that get put together in that way. Okay, so a couple of other questions. So tell me more about your collection itself. How many objects of dress do you have in the collection? Do you know? Or
So
a
at this
ballpark
point,
figure?
At this point, we're not sure because we don't have records from our prior curator on what we have. We have some records, and I know we probably have at least 1,000 artifacts in dress, but we have had much more donations, especially more modern things with the exhibit we just did. So at this point, I'm not sure.
We have a lot of hats. We have a very large hat collection in addition to our standard like clothing textiles. So that's fun.
Very nice.
Yes.
Excellent. And so how do people normally do research with you? Are you open for researchers to come and look at stuff and do things? And how do people do that?
So usually it's appointment based. Our museum is open every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, except for January. We close down in January to do repairs to the building because it's so old. But usually for specific research, if you want to just come up and visit the library, which we have textile books that are from the 19th century from the mills that you could read, or other textile books as well, you're welcome to come up anytime we're open. But if you want to see more of the artifacts and even pull out blueprints, we have original machinery blueprints. In fact, our museum, I didn't even say this in the slideshow, I should have. Our museum houses the largest collection of mill machine blueprints in the nation, possibly the world.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's amazing. Like, who knew? I had another question about this. So you talked about the books from the mill. Do you have sample books of what the textiles that they created, where you, because
Yes.
those are amazing. I love those. Where you actually see a sample of the textile that was created and the process that they used to do that.
So we do have a lot of those. I would pull one out, but we have those boxed away because they do have the fabric in them. They're all packed up. We have many, not necessarily just from American thread, but we also have ones too. For example, we just found one the other day from World War II that was color cards that the quartermaster would supply to the different textile mills that were making things like the woven bands, the thread, the fabric. Because if you think about it, during times of war, you have the Berry Amendment that was signed in 1939, so everything had to be made in-house after that. And so all of these textile-related things were made at different factories. And American Thread did a lot of those. So we have some of those color cards to make sure that we could match the dye colors specific to, the 50 shades of Army Green that happened in the, 40s for World War II.
Oh yeah. So okay. So talk a little bit for some of the viewers who may not know about the Berry
Amendment.
Amendment. Thank you.
So the Berry Amendment came around after World War I, because what had happened is we had relied on a lot of other countries for supplies for military related items, and a lot of that was relied on Germany. So when World War I happened, and we're like, oh, well, that's uncomfortable. Can we continue trading? And we tried to, even after Britain was like, don't do that, that's bad, stop that. We still tried to, and then eventually had to cut off trade. And we realized that doing things in-house would be better. So we started that in World War I, but it didn't officially become a law until 1939. So that amendment just forced anything related to military or war manufacturing to be done inside the nation. So that's why in World War II, really our country flourished, because everything was made here and there was no real battles besides, of course, Pearl Harbor that happened on our shores.
Right. Wow, like so I totally want to come and see your museum the next time I'm up in New England, because it's the kind of museum that I love, with really interesting unusual objects and artifacts, and of course the machines. I want to turn, like you were telling me when we were organizing for this, you're like, yes, this one room has this big red shiny green button that everybody wants to push, and I'm like, yes, I want to push that button.
Yes. That button you actually can push, because that is the button for the tumbler, so which is in operation. So you can push that.
Yeah, there are other buttons you can push, but they don't do anything at the moment.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll get them working by then. But we have many buttons you can push.
So do you have any menswear, or is it predominantly uniforms, or
So
Um,
we
could
do.
you
Do you
before
know
the
where the
introduction of
1930s? It's
Menswear?
hanging on the file cabinets. So we have mostly women's. We have some uniforms. Like for some reason, and maybe this happens in other people's museums, Navy uniforms seem to breed. But otherwise, we mostly have women. But we did get a recent donation of a 1930s suit that was manufactured right here in Willimantic, which Jackie is grabbing. Oh, you grabbed a really cool jacket too. So we just got this donated. We haven't even assessed it yet.
Sneak preview.
Yeah, so this guy right here.
Wow. That's great. Those lapels are amazing.
Yeah, and we have the wonderful, wonderful patterning on this too.
Yeah, and this one actually has, I know I'm touching this, got my gloves on. This one actually has the tag in it. Which is Jacquard & Co., which was
Are you looking for this?
No, there was a tag I thought, but maybe I'm hallucinating. But Jacquard & Co. was in Willimantic right on Main Street, so the same street our museum was on, and they went out in the 50s, they went under. So we were able to kind of date the shape of the general cut of it to about the 1930s.
Oh, okay. So you mentioned something that struck me that I wanted to ask you about. So do you have a sense of how many tailors were in Willimantic at this time? And also, do you know how much of the military manufacturing Willimantic took on during World War II?
So the amount of tailors, I'm not sure. We keep getting random donations in of different items that come from different businesses, but there's not a lot of records for the town. We did have a donation from our local newspaper that they actually gave us a bunch of their archives. So now we haven't researched into it yet, but in there was a lot of architectural drawings, so some of the different buildings. But I know that there was at least 2 or 3. There was a lot there would be one tailor, then they would go under, then another one would come in. We had another donation of a women's coat from a place called Tubrides. I can't even say that word, Tubrides. They were in business from the early 20th century till I think like 97, because I remember being there as a kid. Wow. So, there was quite a few. And then what was the second half of your question? I apologize.
How much? No, that's okay. How much of the military stuff do you think the town took on?
So I'm not sure how much. We had seen, they weren't in our collection, but I saw them online of thread samples from American Thread for the quartermaster's supply. So I feel that there probably was thread that was made for them, because they did manufacture sewing kits for the Army to have, and they would have little spools of thread inside those kits. Sometimes wrapped on a little piece of cardboard, sometimes on the miniature wooden spools. I have a feeling that that was probably American Thread. They were one of the larger manufacturers of thread at the time. I know Connecticut itself did a lot, where the officers' uniform wools were made by Stafford Millen Company, I think, and they're in Stafford, Connecticut, and they actually just renewed that contract to make the new uniforms for the officers.
Oh, wow.
Waterbury Button Company has been making buttons since the 1890s for the military, the officers' buttons. Yeah, Stonington. So if you see any military uniforms that have those gold buttons for the officers, look on the back. It probably says Waterbury Button Company. So I don't know specifically what American Thread did. I know that we found documentation of a certificate from the Civil Defense saying thank you for your efforts to American Thread, which whatever those efforts were, it doesn't specify. There was also certificates and cards that they would give to people for working for the mills to help the war effort during World War II, but it doesn't specify again what they were doing.
Right. We also have a large amount of advertising surrounding American Thread working with the military. So the amount that they were doing it, they were just quietly, servicing the country and weren't making a big to do about their contributions. They were just kind of just contributing.
Yeah, and a ton of different companies step forward. So
you fulfill these orders and then you carry on in that industrialization kind of way. So we have a question from the audience, actually two. When did the factory close? And do you know what happened to all the factory workers?
Yes. Before we answer that question, I apologize. I actually have to sign off and say goodnight to you all. I'm in a band, and my gig is about to start in an hour, so I have to go and prepare for that. So I just thank you everybody for having us, and thanks for letting me hop on. It was wonderful chatting with you all, and Chelsea, I can certainly carry on the conversation with you guys and answer all your questions. So
Awesome. Have a great gig tonight, Jackie. Thank you so much for joining us.
thank you.
Break some legs.
Thank you. I will try not to break my own.
Okay, so I'm gonna look up the exact dates on the workers because there actually was a big strike, and I'm gonna just make sure I have the right documentation on that. So the factory closed in 1985, and I'm just pulling up the exact details on the strike. Yeah, they were around for a while, considering how we have a bunch of posters on information about kind of the death of the industrial era, but we do a big reenactment every year of different strikes. So
cool.
yeah, here it is. Just found it.
And for the reenactors
so there was
in the audience, for the reenactors in the audience, you guys should like go and reenact some of the strikes. That would be cool.
Yeah, so we do a big thing always on Labor Day because the strike was actually on Labor Day that happened, and I can't find the exact information on it. There was a couple different strikes that happened with American Thread. There was one of 1925, which was about part of the progressive era with unions forming and mill workers not getting paid as much as they should. But the big strike, which I can't find the details, of course, of. And we have articles, of course, in our collection about the strike. See, my specialty is on the textiles, so when it comes to these little nitty-gritty facts.
So after the strikes, I assume, like many mill towns, the workers moved away and went to other places, and some stayed around. Is that essentially what happened there in?
Yeah. So what happened is American Thread had closed down, and a lot of their stuff moved down to Mexico. And I'm not sure if they're still in operation down there. There's rumors that they are, but they closed down, and a lot of the workers then had to find other work. So they evacuated Willimantic, and Willimantic kind of fell into a pretty hard time to the point where you can find a 90-minute special, and it's called Heroin Town, and it's about our lovely town of Willimantic. And I'm not kidding you on that. We unfortunately gained the reputation of being the heroin capital of New England during the 90s. However, with the building of the Frog Bridge, and I think it was 2001, they actually started a big campaign to bring Willimantic back. They made this cute little thing called Romantic Willimantic and started putting some money into the town and fixing it up. A lot of the old mills that were abandoned got taken down because they wound up housing a lot of drug abusers and unsafe circumstances. So some of them are now turned into apartments and office buildings. So, the town saw a bit of turmoil, and that was, while I was living here and as a child and growing up and hanging out as a teenager. So, fun times. But yeah, a lot of them, I don't know specifically what happened to a lot of the workers, but they did leave. They had to find jobs, and with this big factory gone, what are you going to do?
Yeah. All right. Well, I have to say we have come to the end of our hour together. And I just want to say thank you, Chelsea, so much for this time. It was really fascinating. How far are you away from Boston? Just to give me on the West Coast a perspective of distance, because the East Coast is all so close together.
So it's an hour and a half away because I have to commute there. That's where Simmons University is, or Simmons College. So.
All right. Well, good to know. Like, that's an easy trip outside of Boston. All right. So thank you so much. And to the audience out there, please thank our guest today, Chelsea Kniff, Knife, for her time and effort and the fabulous machines you showed us. And thank you for attending. Please follow Costume Society of America on Facebook and Instagram. You can check out all of the videos and the video content that we've been making over the past year on our YouTube channel. And you'll be aware of the upcoming episodes from the Conversations on Dress series. Lastly, and in the spirit of the holidays coming around, if you enjoyed today's content, adopt a machine. Get in touch with Chelsea and adopt a machine. But I also implore you to make a small donation to help keep this content free for all. So thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.